To introduce Nadeem Aslam, whose debut novel, Season of the Rainbirds, was published almost 25 years ago. Nadeem was born in Gujranwala, a Punjabi town north of Lahore, and came to the north of England with his family at the age of 14. After studying biochemistry at the University of Manchester, which I'm sure we'll talk about later in this week of all weeks, he set his first novel in Pakistan, a child's eye view of a violent shift in society and the spread of extremist sects. His subsequent novels have ranged widely from Maps for Lost Lovers, set in a cocooned urban community of Pakistani incomers and their offspring in the north of England, and The Wasted Vigil, which traced decades of Afghan history, to The Blind Man's Garden, where the so-called war on terror in Afghanistan spills into neighboring Pakistan. Yet, despite an avid eye on current events, and Nadeem once described the news to me as the most emotional program on television, his novels are deeply layered with history and literature, from the Bamyan Buddhas and the Brontes to Don Quixote and Urdu poetry. Among his many prizes are the Kiriyama and Wyndham Campbell Prizes and the Lannan and Encore Awards. He has been shortlisted for the Impact Dublin International Literature Prize and longlisted for the Man Booker. His fifth and latest novel, The Golden Legend, published by Faber and Faber earlier this year and just out in the United States, is set in Zamana, a fictitious Pakistani city of 10 million souls, resembling Lahore. In Badami Bagh, named after its former almond groves, a mysterious culprit is entering the mosques and broadcasting the secrets of its citizens, mischief that has already had murderous consequences and is stoking the flames of religious intolerance towards the Christian minority. Meanwhile, a botched assassination attempt by religious militants on the Grand Trunk Road means the target, an American diplomat or CIA operative, has killed several passers-by. The bereaved families come under Pakistani government pressure to forgive the killer under Sharia law, allowing him to return to the US. Now, among the luminous characters caught up in these complex, spiraling events are, I'm sure we'll hear more of them later, but just very briefly, Masood and Nargis, an architect couple in their 50s who have a library inside a former paper factory. Their male housekeeper, Lily, am I pronouncing it right? A rickshaw driver, and his grown-up daughter, Helen, who are Christians. Aisha, the daughter of a gentle Islamic cleric, and her 7-year-old son, Bilu, a child maimed by the US drone strike that killed his militant father. There's also Imran. Imran is a Kashmiri who came to Pakistan to learn to fight for his homeland, but is now on the run from the training camp whose vision of the future he has rejected. Now, Nadeem is going to read a very short extract for us first, so I'd be delighted if you do that.
Thank you everyone for coming. I'm just going to read from the beginning of the novel. So Maya's introduction is sufficient. So it's as though you've just picked up the book and begun to read. It was a large room. There were many shelves of books, a metal helmet for a stallion from the times of the Crusades, and they were the vertebrae of a whale from a bay in Antarctica. In one alcove was the earliest known photograph of a snowflake. The child entered the silence and stillness of the vast interior through the far door. She came past the fishing canoe resting on a long, low table under the window. She was 7 years old, and her name was Helen. 2 buildings stood next to each other at the center of the room. Each was taller than the girl, was perhaps 4 times her height. During that early morning hour, the light still only half awake, she stood looking at them. They appeared to be mosques, and they were beautiful, with their families of domes, semi-domes, and minarets. She thought of them as two elaborate hats or headdresses, possibly meant for jinns or a pair of giants from a fairy tale. She considered taking a few additional steps and peering through one of their windows. The colors and features were so precise and assorted, the muted shine on the walls and the arcs of the domes. She reached out and touched the detail of a painted leaf. Building situated within a room. Normally, it was a room that existed within a building, was contained by it. She described a circle around them now. She went past the cupboard where stood the vase of dried branches brought back from Russia. They were from the apple trees that Count Tolstoy had planted with his own hands. 4 of them were still alive in his orchard. The girl stopped when one of the buildings emitted a creak, as though it were experiencing a mild earthquake. It stirred now and rose a few inches, breaking free of gravity, swaying a little. And then it ascended further, beginning to travel at languid pace towards the ceiling. It was being pulled up by the delicate-seeming yet strong chains that were attached to the tips of its minarets. Eventually it came to a stop, up there in the high distance. The immense room she was in was a library and a study, a place of fertile solitude. Due to its size, it was difficult to heat in the winter months. Not long ago, they'd had the idea of bringing in 2 small cabins, each just large enough to house a desk and chair, a stack of immediately necessary books and papers, and a small heater. The thinking was that from December to February, a person would go into one of the cabins, close the door behind her, and work in that pocket of warmth. From ordinary cabins, however, they had become detailed models of 2 historic buildings, the Great Mosque of Cordoba and the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. The girl had caught glimpses of them being constructed during the previous few weeks. Now they were ready, and because it was June, they were being winched up to remain suspended up there until December. After the Hagia Sophia, she watched the Great Mosque of Cordoba being pulled up by the system of pulleys and chains. Neither of the 2 buildings had a floor of its own. They would borrow the room's floor when they were down here. So when Helen looked up now, she could see into the interiors. She imagined moths fluttering like trapped prayers under the miniature domes in the evenings, bumping against the colored insides. She would always remember this handful of moments from her early years, childhood, when minutes could feel as prolonged as hours and the days vanished in the blink of an eye. It was Helen's father who had carpentered the buildings, and it was he who was causing them to rise through the air, storing them out of the way. She turned and looked at him where he stood at the other end of the room, operating the various cranks and pulleys located near the corner. She liked the fact that he made one last minor adjustment to the chains, making sure that both buildings were held at exactly the same height. He was a tall, bright-blooded man, and his name was Lily.
Thank you. Nadeem, you once told me that all your fiction is sparked by anything that distresses me. And so I wondered what the spark was for this book.
The spark for I'm in a strange situation with that book because I know precisely the day and the date and perhaps even the hour. Mm-hmm. On 4th of January 2011, when I was working on my previous novel, the governor of Punjab province in Pakistan was murdered by his bodyguard. Salman Taseer, his name was, the governor's name. And Pakistan has draconian blasphemy laws, and the governor had wanted to change those laws. And this chap, the bodyguard, had objected to that, so he assassinated the governor. And I thought that I will write about it one day. That not one day, but the moment I finish this book, my next book will be about Pakistan's blasphemy laws. So that's 4th of January 2011. 4 days later, on 8th of January 2011, in Tucson, Arizona, in the United States, Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords was shot at by someone in the audience during an assembly she was giving. And that sort of then helped, that fed into the book, into the initial idea of the book. So originally it was the idea of blasphemy, etc. And then this idea that what means are allowed if you disagree with someone. What are you allowed to use? And this is happening today. Look what's happened in Manchester. Look what's happened 2 hours ago in Egypt. You know, so
maybe you should tell, because a lot of people won't know what happened in Egypt.
A group of pilgrims, Coptic Christian pilgrims, were shot at, and their bus was stopped. Some hooded figures got onto the bus and sprayed bullets. 22, at least, people have been killed, among them children. And so the idea that if you disagree with someone, you wish to make a point that a bullet is allowable, that then fed into the novel. And then as the years went by, I was writing the previous book. So that was the seed.
And you mentioned the blasphemy laws as the kind of kernel. I think when we met, you said you were writing a novel about the Pakistan blasphemy laws. So it obviously became a lot broader. But just for that, on that for one moment, through several of the characters, including Lily and his daughter Helen, you show not only the effects of these laws, but the kind of hourly and daily discrimination that goes on against what you call people who are treated as half citizens or non-citizens. And for me, reading that, there was a kind of disdain that sort of resembles the caste system. There are people who are imprisoned for drinking from a Muslim's glass, that kind of thing. Can you tell us a bit more about what you see as the roots of this kind of intolerance, and also the modern incarnation of it?
There is a thriving Christian community who are professionals and who have reached the mainstream. Of course, they are lawyers, journalists, brilliant. But I was trying to write about the people that I had known and I had come into contact with, and people that someone like Asiya Bibi, who has been in prison, who the governor was trying to help, who has been in prison for years. She did nothing. I think she took a drink from a glass which was meant for a Muslim. So the remnants of it are from the caste system. But once again, to look at everything novelistically is my intention, has always been my intention. I wanted to show these people under extreme stress, and then show how are they trying to make a life? What are they trying to negotiate? To go back to these people, to go back to what's happened in Manchester and what's happened in Egypt. One of my most vivid memories is watching a documentary about 2 decades ago, if not more. It was about dyslexia. A class had been selected, and they were testing all the children to see which one of them might have dyslexia. And one of them turned out to have dyslexia. And all of this was on film, the children's testing, etc., etc. So this child, who was about 7 or 8, and he was on film, and now he had to be told that you have a condition, this thing. And he was told that you have dyslexia. And he said, what does that mean? And he said, and the interviewer said, well, you know, when a teacher writes 2 plus 3 equals, and you have to do that sum, you have to solve that problem, as it were. The other children can see immediately that it's a 3. They can see immediately that it's a plus. They can see immediately that it's a 2. They can see immediately that it's an equal, and then they do 3 plus 2 equals 5. The child's face just collapsed. I sometimes think about it and I well up. And he first has to work out what that first thing is, 3. Then he has to work out what that second thing is, plus. He then has to work out that it's a 2. He then has to work out that it's an equal. Then he does the sum. And he said, that's not fair. Does that make sense? He said that 3 plus 2 equals 5, that's the easy bit. He says the difficult bit is trying to work out what that first thing is. That I have to do 4 extra things. So this is what I was trying to select these characters and to show what is it to love under all this stress, what it is to be a brother under all this stress. So people who've lost their children in Egypt and in Manchester, there will never be a day when they don't have to solve, but there will never be a day when they don't have to get over the fact that their child is no longer here. Let's go to a party. Let's go on holiday. First of all, those 3 plus 2 equal will have to be negotiated. Then life comes in. Life is the easy bit. In the novel, someone makes a mobile, like a wind chime out of keys. Lots of keys, and it's hung up. And Helen says at one point that in order to sing, in order to make its noise, it needs freedom, it needs air, it needs to be hung up. You place it on the floor and gravity silences it. Gravity gets rid of the song. You know?
Yes.
So that's so that was the intention. Blasphemy, Imran, who is from Kashmir, who lives under an insurgency or occupation, whatever you want to call it. All of these things. Ultimately, my aim is to get to that thing, which is the human thing, the song.
The song. I also wanted to ask you about purity, because as you say in the novel, the name Pakistan means land of the pure. And yet this is a novel which is partly an affirmation, partly a celebration of impurity. And one of the central metaphors in this novel is Masood's father's book. Now, Masood is one of the architects. His father's book, That They May Know Each Other, that they might know each other, which celebrates all kinds of connections between worlds. And throughout this novel, there is this shadow book being presented, the nuggets of these intercultural moments that have affected us and all civilizations. So this is a book that's lost and recovered. It's razored by a spy, and then it's sewn together with thread. Could you explain a little more about this book, what the inspiration was, and whether these kinds of intercultural moments are things that you go around collecting as well? The history.
Yes, that's a very good question. And I needed a symbol. And the book became, and the damage to the book was important as well. I just did a little. So somebody cuts up the book, and then someone takes a gold thread and stitches it back up. So page upon page, the cut is different on all the pages. And the idea of that, I keep going back to Manchester, but it was yesterday. And it is about all this. I've spent most of my life in those towns in the north of England, where there's a great Muslim community in Wales. So in Rochdale last year, a cleric, a mullah of a mosque, was murdered by a chap, a young man, who objected to him giving the talismans, taweez, which is called, which is in India and Pakistan, has been going on for hundreds of years. In India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. This young man stabbed this really gentle 71-year-old cleric. He was crossing a playground after having been to the mosque, and he and an accomplice were waiting, and they stabbed him. And the accomplice is now, we think, in Syria, but one of the guys has been. So I was thinking, as I said, this has been going on for centuries. That people have been wearing verses of the Quran around their neck or on their biceps, but suddenly now the Wahhabis have decided that it's not allowed. The idea of purity, I think one thing we have to insist through all of this is difference. Absolutely, to say there is no one way of being a Muslim. There is no one way of being British. There's no one way of being American. There is a clip doing the rounds of the internet at the moment. It's a small fragment, about 20 seconds, from an interview with James Baldwin. And we don't know what the question is that the interviewer has put to Baldwin, but it doesn't matter, we can guess. What matters is Baldwin's answer, and which is the clip. And here's what it is. Just what is it that you would like me to reconcile myself to? I was born in this country nearly 60 years ago. I'm not going to live for another 60. You've always told me that it takes time. Well, it's taken my time. It's taken my father's time. It's taken my uncle's time. It's taken my brother's and my sister's time. It's taken my nieces and my nephews' time. Just how much time do you need for your progress? His rage is barely containable as he pronounces the last three words, for your progress. That this is how long we have been waiting. The idea of who is American and who isn't English and who isn't Muslim, the struggle has to go on. People keep talking to me about the pre-Trump era and the post-Trump era, which again, in a way feeds back to this area. When you belong to the margins, when you belong to a minority, you know that the pre-Trump era is the post-Trump era, really. What I'm about to share with you is not anecdotal evidence that someone told someone who told someone else and who told someone else, who might have heard it from someone else. These are cold, hard facts about people in my life who I love, who are closer to me than my skin. If you look like me and you work behind a counter in a bank, let's say, and the customer has come in and they say, I would like a loan, or something's gone wrong with my, etc., etc. And it's your job to tell them that to decline the loan, to say, I'm sorry, nothing to do with me, but I just work here, but I've talked to the people and to the manager and what have you, and this can't happen. Having told the customer this, you are now more or less counting the seconds. When is he going to say, yeah, well, you Paki? This is not anecdotal evidence. So this is when you belong to the minorities. People keep saying, oh, the gloves are coming off, the gloves are coming off. The gloves have always been off. Now the mask is coming off. Now they want to do it blatantly. And there is hope in all this, in that this isn't new. Our resistance is old too. We have ways of undermining this. We have ways of sustaining ourselves. There's a thing called solidarity, etc., etc.
Well, I wanted to ask you something later, but I'll ask you now because it fits here, I think, which is that there is a lot of rage in this book. I read rage into it. I, as a reader, feel rage. And it's not the rage of the fanatic. It's the rage of the decent people who are enraged by injustice or by the way people are treated. And There's an epigraph which is from the late Urdu poet, Katir Shifai. There is no greater denier of God than he who accepts injustice instead of rebelling. And those are the first words in the book. So I wondered if you think that literature has that power to spur a kind of rebellious rage of that kind rather than the fanaticism, and also whether you embrace the idea of being a political writer.
It's a very good question, and to go back and say that this is the rage of like normal. It's the rage of normal people. It's the rage of everybody in this room who are agitated at what's going on. One of the things we have to remember is that the powerful people who are in charge, they not only lie to us about themselves, they lie to us about us. They say, you are like this. We have to tell them, no, we are not like this. Everybody wants power. I don't. I do not want any kind of power over anyone. Everyone wants to get ahead. Speak for yourself. I don't want to go ahead. Leave me alone to do my work. They want power. Therefore, they think everybody else does. And sometimes we buy into this. This is one of the problems that we actually believe them. And yet the fact of the matter is that ordinary, decent people, every single day are making sacrifices. They don't want to go, that they actually say that, okay, if I did this, I could get ahead, but no, I have this thing called responsibility. I was in town just the other day, and at the weekend, they have those stalls, Socialist Party workers handing out their leaflets or the anti-vivisection, etc. I stopped at a stall which was for the National Health Service. They were the National Health Service, and they were handing out leaflets. And I put my hand into my pocket and I dropped some pound coins into their donation box. And I took some leaflets and I was about to walk away when I noticed that they had badges, lapel badges. And I wanted one. And I put my hand into my pocket again, brought out another coin, and I said, I would like this. And I was about to drop it into the donation box when a young man placed his hand on mine and said, it's okay, you've given enough. And I sort of walked away, and I remember thinking, oh, look, you've given enough. People would think, oh, but this happened to me. And this is how objects become sacred. This is how wells become sacred. This is how rivers and mountains become sacred, because certain good things are associated with them. I will never lose that badge. So that's the first thing. To answer your second question, which is about the idea of exactly that the rage of the way this come. I'm reading a book by Alfred Kazin called God and the American Writer. It's his essays on Faulkner, Whitman, etc., and their relationship with God, Melville, etc. It's a beautiful book. Everyone should read it. He writes an essay about Whitman, and then he goes on to write the next essay about Emily Dickinson. And he says that while Walt Whitman made a production of being a writer, a production of being published, and I am America, and my book is America, and I am the American, etc. Emily Dickinson's nearly 2,000 poems, she had no audience. She published 11 poems. 10 of them were against her wishes. So her poems are her life. She wasn't addressing anyone. She was trying to work out certain things about herself. If I could redo my life, I would not publish. This sounds very strange. My books will exist, but they feel so personal to me, of my way of trying to work out what my life is and but then the books do seem to connect to people. And And if there is politics, if there's current affairs, I gave a reading at Cambridge about a month ago, and someone came up to me and said, "I love the book, but aren't you meant to be a recluse?" And I said, I don't know. No, I don't think so. And why do you say? And he says, I love the book, but it seems that this is the work of someone who never switches off the TV. News, as it were, that it's all, in a good way, he said. He wanted to reassure me.
You can be a recluse and watch television.
Well, absolutely. Maybe that's what you do when you're a recluse. I don't know. And so the idea of again, everybody in this room and me just responding as a human being to the really shamelessness that is going on out there at times. And that there is but then I happen to be a novelist, and I put it down. Maybe I've said that to you before, but the great Polish poet, one of my beloved masters, wrote, when thinking about Osip Mandelstam being put to death by Stalin, wrote, "You who wronged a simple man, bursting into laughter at the crime, kept a pack of fools around you to mix good with evil, to blur the line. Do not feel safe. The poet remembers. You can kill one, but another is born. The words are written down, the deed, the date." So my work, at some level, is my way of saying to the unjust, the wicked people in this world, you think you got away with it? Fine. Out there you did. Not in here. In here, you will be put on trial. In here, I'm going to judge you. Me and my readers are going to judge you, and we're going to sentence you. So that's where everyone else in this room comes in.
The audience.
Yeah.
Now, I also wanted to ask you about names, because names we know are very important. And when we spoke, I think when your last novel was coming out and you were working on this, I think it was going to be called, you said, a novel about the blasphemy laws to be called 1,000 Miles by Moonlight, which I never forgot. So
that's right.
Why did it change to the Golden Legend? And also, can you explain why Zamana, which is your fictitious city?
Zamana is an Urdu and Persian word. It means, it has any number of meanings, but it means the world, it means the times we live in, the world and everything it contains, the zeitgeist, as it were. And I wanted a fictional city. I thought I should. And in a way, I wanted the story to rise above the immediate underpinnings. Though it is Pakistan, it is Lahore, it is. So there is that. And the other thing, the title, I think the book kept changing as I was writing it. I began writing it the day after I finished the previous novel. So when I met you, I was a year into the writing of the book, and there were 3 more to go. So, the title, The Golden Legend, I found, I hadn't yet found this title because I hadn't picked up. There is a 13th century compendium. It's a Lives of the Saints. You know, the life of St. Margaret, the life of St. Lawrence, etc., etc. And it was, I think, one of the first books published in English. And I thought that the characters in my book were a little like saints. I wanted them to, not in a secular way, I wanted them to hold on to certain ideals and then the world to come buffeting in at them. The way it happened to all those saints. I mean, they were all murdered. You know, and we were speaking about minorities within minorities. One of the most frightening things about the Golden Legend, this compendium, is how often rape was a weapon used against women. That St. Margaret or St. Anne or St. Agatha, they were told, get rid of your belief, renounce Christianity, and they said no. They were sold to a brothel. We know what that means. They were married to a brute. We know, and they disguised themselves as men and entered monasteries and lived as monks, etc., etc. So all of that, when I was reading it, kept feeding into my icons, as it were. So I had an icon representing patience, love, devotion, and then the central thing, which was, I knew it had to be a woman. It had to be the Madonna and child, Aisha and her son Billu. It's so we have Madonna of the Drones in the novel, and that is based on. There's a Madonna of the pinks, Madonna of the pomegranate, Madonna of the goldfinch, etc. So I thought we should have a 21st century Madonna. So this woman whose husband is a militant, and this is what we keep coming back to. So the militant is killed. I show that's, but then there is this thing called collateral damage. The little 7-year-old son whose legs have to be amputated. So there's this Madonna with a child with no legs. And the idea of I don't have to tell the audience anything. You can just Google this term called fun-sized terrorists. And this is and the report will come up. And the report is this group of drone operators in the United States. And they say that when they used to see children on the screens of somewhere in Iraq or Waziristan or whatever, they used to call them fun-sized terrorists. And so again, this goes back to the outrage one feels. And to think, okay, I can't do anything. Well, I can do this. And the paradox is that this is someone who thinks that this perhaps would not be published if there was an alternative reality. So that was.
Yes.
And the idea of political writer, I think that is what I've been saying all along. That is. But first and foremost, it's a novel. It has to, that when I write a tract or a non-fiction, write a book of essay, it will say non-fiction. This is a novel, so I have to make sure that whatever the demands of fiction are, rhythm, language, characterization, etc., etc., is met. And I mean, half my readers say that my books are too beautiful. Half my readers say my books are too violent.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because it's about love and beauty as much as it is about violence and ugliness. And that twinning does make people very uneasy, some people. But you once told me that beauty is a way of mourning the dead. Can you explain that, and also your approach to the meld of beauty and ugliness? You have moments where someone after a whole community has been torched, they will be walking through the street and avoid stepping on a rose petal. This is one of the things that you remember from the book. So how do you see that mixing or that combination of the two things?
Well, I think that probably is one of the philosophical and metaphysical questions of life, in that does the horror of the world diminish the beauty of the world? And does the beauty of the world diminish the horror of the world? How do we live? How do we live with what is going on out there right now? And the idea that there are friends, that there is a child's laughter, that there is love, that there is sex, all of those things, and yet we also know that as we speak, dangerous things are going on out there. And I don't think I know what the answer is. It's a kind of negotiation and not trying to forget. is the answer. I don't, and I think that might even be an ongoing investigation, as it were, that I don't have the definitive answer yet. Perhaps one day I will.
Well, one of the ways in which you counterpoint this violence is with kind of islands and moments or places of sanctuary. So there is an island which is somewhere the architects have built a modern mosque. There is a museum of glass flowers. Can you tell us a little about those places in the book and what they represent to you?
What they represent is a kind of oasis where this is an island, and an island like this exists in Lahore. In the river Ravi, there's a place called Kamran Ki Baradari, which is a pavilion, which is the first Mughal structure in Lahore. And it was originally on the edge of the river, on the river bank, but the river then split and sort of made it into an island. And I remember going there and thinking, and of course, in the river Indus itself, there are any number of sacred islands. One is sacred to Hindus, called Sadhu Bela, where there is a temple. And there is no bridge, so you have to take a boat from the bank to this Hindu temple. And I just wanted to, just the idea of being cut off, a kind of oasis where you can sit and think. The idea, which is what I do. At one level, I was also trying to evoke this brilliant French movie called Les Amants de Pont Neuf, where a group of people come together on the bridge Pont Neuf in Paris while it is closed for renovation. So there is no traffic, so a bunch of homeless people come together and we see their story while the city is going on in the background. I think partly that's what I was trying to do. And the idea of withdrawal and the idea of, I mean, there's an island, one of my favorite places is in Northumberland called Lindisfarne, which is an island in the sea, just off the edge of England, which, when the tide is out, actually becomes part of England. And we think it was the first place in England that was attacked by the Vikings. And there's a monastery there. So I think I was thinking of that too. And any number of islands are linked with medicinal property and healing. It's because they are away from the mainland, so herbs and weeds, etc., are not taken out; they just remain there. So there are people who have knowledge of healing on islands. So islands are. So that's what I was trying to do. Halfway through this hectic urban life, I wanted to remove the characters so that they and the reader could just slow down and think. And the island, I wanted to also evoke that. I've just come back from Palestine. I've just come back from the West Bank, and
Palfest.
Sorry?
Palfest.
For the Palestine Literature Festival, and I was there at Masjid al-Aqsa, which is the place where Muhammad ascended to heaven, and there is a myth associated with one of the islands in the river Indus, that while Muhammad's steed, which is called the Burak, which is a winged horse with a woman's face, a piece of earth had fallen from his hoof and landed in the river Indus and had grown into an island. So there was a kind of, so these were just various motifs I was trying to explore. But the idea was isolation. The idea was, should you try to remove yourself from society? Because the idea of self and the self within a society is very important to me. I will not pretend that I don't have a mother. I will not pretend that I don't have a neighbor. I can't pretend that I got to be this size without anyone saying to me at every corner, watch out, a car is coming. I'm an idiot. So the idea that I am alone is anathema to me. That I like living in a society. You know, one of the most shocking things that I remember is that line of Mrs. Thatcher's, what she said, there is no such thing as society, which is only talked by Theresa May saying last year that if you think you belong everywhere, you belong nowhere, which I thought was absolutely appalling.
I should ask you where you stand in relation to belonging and home then. I mean, if you disagree with that.
I think it's slightly, well, it's fine. I think that some of these tropes, some of these ways of thinking are actually, perhaps, it's possible. Again, it's a continuing process. It's possible that they have been made obsolete or they're on their way. It is possible to belong to England and Pakistan and India and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, as it were. It is possible because travel for a certain class of people, certainly us, I always say that is now easy, you know, travel is easy, but I've been saying that for years now, that we mustn't romanticize that too. People say, you know, oh yes, I'll see you next week in New York, and we saw each other in Sydney, you know, last month, etc., etc. Let's ask the person who cleaned this floor how easy it is for them to cross a border or to get on a plane, etc., etc. That too was what I was trying to do. That someone leaving civil war and trying to find a refuge. That's where the island comes from. And 5,000 people that we know of drowned in the Mediterranean last year. You know, trying to find that island, trying to get away from this mess called the zeitgeist, which is the name of the city. So that's what I mean, that I wanted the book to just slightly float off the surface of concrete realities and become metaphorical too.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to go back to something you said about women, because you were talking about Aisha and in relation to abuse of women. And, but you've drawn a relationship both in Maps for Lost Lovers and in this book between boys and men beating their sisters and wives and blowing themselves up. Can you say a bit about what you see as that relationship?
I mean, again, I think that it might be that you know, any number of these chaps who go and commit these atrocities, not all of them, but they do have some kind of abusive background, that the women in their life have suffered at their hands first. And then it's somehow sort of grows up and the larger society is. It's not always the case, but that is basically what I was trying to think of. And the idea of women. I mean, I think that women are made to do everything, and men get the credit. That seems to, women run the world, but they don't get the credit. A man gets the credit. You know, according to a report I saw in The Guardian, here in Britain, girls as young as 6 think that brilliance is a male attribute. This is here in England, this year. You know, so what is going on? Can we please just rethink some of these things? To that, what is in the air that is happening? And this is what a book becomes a part of your thinking process. I mean, I was thinking about, people are going on and on about how humans are destroying the planet. When you begin to systematically read about what is going on, you think, look, humans have been around for thousands of years. The conditions in the planet started going downhill, 150 years ago? Can we go back and see what happened? And then suddenly, humans are not destroying the planet. Capitalism is destroying the planet.
Tell us a little bit about your family background at this moment, because I know, well, why don't you?
Well, my family, I always say that I have Islam and communism as the twin strands of my DNA. My mother is a religious person, and her family too are religious. And my father, more or less, comes from a secular. He was a communist, and he is a communist. And so I got that from them, the tension of, and then trying to. It really has been a privilege to watch that marriage, to see how two people who are so different ideologically learn to negotiate and how that happens, and what to learn from either of them. This is slightly at a tangent. I was just thinking the other day. My aunt died in Pakistan. My mother's sister-in-law, her brother's wife, died. This is from some years ago. And and my mother was in the kitchen, I was in the kitchen, my father was in the kitchen, and the phone rang, and it was one of those phones that are attached to the wall, so if you answer it, your back is to the room. So I will have to go there and pick up the phone while my back is to the room. And my mother went up to answer the phone, and she picked up, and it was her brother telling her that my wife has just died. My mother let out a piercing cry, and she was grief-stricken, and this was a woman, and it was unexpected. She was a young woman in her 50s. And she turned to the room, me and my father, and said that Asgari has died. And then she went back, and she was weeping, just now leaning against the wall and just inconsolable. And I remember standing behind her, thinking, what do I do? What is required of me here? Do I take the phone away from her? Do I have the right to take the phone away from her? That maybe she needs to be with her brother at this moment. But this was just a person who was just completely broken. And all I thought was, if she falls, I have to catch her. Basically, I mean, this is a man being brute strength. This is what I have to do. And 10 seconds went by, 20 seconds went by, a minute went by, and from the corner of my eye, I saw my father go past me. He went to my mother's back, he placed his hand on her shoulder and said, we have to help him, not add to his burden. And I saw him go back to where he was. And within the next 5 seconds, 10 seconds, my mother stood upright. She absorbed all her grief back into herself, realizing that at that moment, she's not important, he is on the other. And she began to ask really rational questions. Where are you? Where are the girls? Who else is there with you? Etc., etc. So, and I remember thinking that, yes, her grief didn't go away. But at that moment, she realized that this is secondary. And he made her realize that the idea that we can't save ourselves, only each other. You know, so this is at a tangent to what you were saying. So,
well, I just want to ask one more.
I mean, I was a grown man. I didn't know what to do, but he did.
But you've spoken as well before about the virtues of an extended family, and I just wanted to ask, as the last question, really, before opening it to the floor, about how you said that bring it back to where we began in a way, about the many ways of being Muslim.
Difference.
How was family part of what educated you?
Precisely that. I mean, I counted not long. I have 51 first cousins, So I have a woman who covers herself like this, just her eyes are showing and she wears gloves. I have a woman who works for the Pakistani Air Force. I have a cousin who's involved there. So the entire spectrum is there. I have teachers, housewives, filmmakers, people who pray 5 times a day, people who don't pray at all, people who are atheists. So there's an entire spectrum. So, which again goes back to when people say, Muslim, and you really have to ask yourself, what Muslim? In that, one of the things that has happened, again to go back to right to the beginning, and with Manchester, one of the things now that, as a human being and as a novelist, I and all of us also have to keep a check on is that you do hear women telling you, and this again is not anecdotal evidence, these are friends who say, someone tried to snatch my veil and called me a name. And who then goes on to say, but look what we are doing out there, what do you expect? That it's been internalized. They think you deserve the abuse. Then you have to say, no.
It wasn't you.
It wasn't you.
Yeah.
Exactly, that you have certain responsibilities as a citizen, but they are the responsibilities of a white citizen, of a black, etc., and a whole spectrum. That you don't get to accept somebody's abuse, thinking we accept. And I was shocked when that happened for the first time, that someone called me a name, but what do you expect? Look what we are up to. And you think, who is this we?